Jonathan Blake here. On January 24th, 2026, something happened that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The President of the United States threatened a 100% tariff on every single product coming from America's closest ally and largest trading partner, Canada. Not China, not Russia, Canada. This isn't just another trade dispute. It's not just about tariffs or electric cars or canola seeds. It's about the possible unraveling of an 80-year economic partnership that helped shape the modern world order after World War II. Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what happened, why it happened, and what it means for the future of North America, the USMCA agreement, and the global balance of power. If you value clear, fact-based analysis without the noise, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because the rules of the world economy may be shifting, and you deserve to understand how and why. Let's begin. On Saturday, January 24th, 2026, the President of the United States said he would put a 100% tax on every product coming from America's biggest trading partner. That partner is not China or Mexico, it is Canada. This is not just another threat about trade taxes. This is about something much bigger. It is about a major break in how countries have worked together since World War II. And it started with one speech at a meeting in Switzerland. World leaders loved the speech and stood up to clap, but it made the most powerful man in the world very angry. What you are seeing is the breaking apart of an 80-year friendship between countries, and the effects are just starting. According to news reports from Reuters and the Associated Press, President Donald Trump wrote on his social media site, Truth Social, on Saturday, that he would put a 100% tax on all Canadian goods. This would happen if Canada goes ahead with its trade deal with China. Trump wrote, if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. Here is what really happened. On January 16, 2026, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney went to Beijing. Carney became Prime Minister in March 2025. In Beijing, he made a trade agreement with China. According to official Canadian government statements, the deal lowered Canada's 100% tax on Chinese electric cars to just 6.1% for up to 49,000 cars per year. In exchange, China agreed to lower taxes on Canadian canola seeds to about 15% by March 1, 2026. China also agreed to reduce high taxes on Canadian pork and seafood. At first, Trump supported the deal. According to Reuters, on January 16th, the same day Carney announced the China agreement, Trump told reporters at the White House, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that. 8 days later, everything changed. What happened between those 8 days? A meeting in Davos, Switzerland. To understand this moment, you need to know 3 things: how the US and Canada trade with each other, who Mark Carney is, and what the USMCA trade agreement means. First, the trade relationship. According to news reports and Canadian government information, about 3.6 billion Canadian dollars, which is roughly 2.7 billion US worth of goods and services, cross the border between the US and Canada every single day. That is not every year, that is every day. This adds up to about $1.3 trillion in trade every year. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Canada was America's 3rd largest source of imported goods in 2024. These imports were worth $412 billion. Canada is also the top place where the U.S. sends its exports. More than 60% of the oil the U.S. imports comes from Canada. 85% of the electricity the U.S. imports comes from Canada. Canada is the biggest foreign supplier of steel, aluminum, and uranium to the United States. Canada also supplies 34 important minerals and metals that the U.S. military considers necessary for national security. This is not a small relationship. The U.S. and Canada economies are deeply connected, almost like they are joined together. Now about Mark Carney. Before he became Prime Minister in March 2025, Carney was in charge of the Bank of Canada. Then he became the head of the Bank of England. He was the first person from another country to ever hold that job. Later, he worked as a special representative for the United Nations on climate and money issues. Many people around the world see him as a calm and very smart economist. He is not someone who causes drama. He is the kind of person who gets standing applause at big meetings in Davos, and that is exactly what happened. Finally, the USMCA. This is the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. Trump renegotiated it from the old NAFTA agreement. This agreement has a required review coming up in July 2026. According to experts, this review gives all three countries a chance to change the terms or even leave the agreement completely. Trump himself said in January that the USMCA was irrelevant. According to Reuters, the agreement has protected Canada and Mexico from Trump's bigger trade war with taxes. But that protection is now starting to break, and China just became the tool Trump is using to break it. Let me explain what happened step by step with exact dates and direct quotes. On January 16, 2026, the China deal was announced. According to the official statement from the Prime Minister's Office of Canada, Carney announced a preliminary agreement in principle to address economic and trade issues between Canada and the People's Republic of China. Here are the details. According to Global Affairs Canada, Canada would lower its 100% tax on Chinese electric cars to 6.1% for the first 49,000 cars imported each year. China would lower taxes on Canadian canola seed from very high levels to about 15%. China would reduce its 100% tax on Canadian canola oil and meal. China would lower its 25% taxes on Canadian pork and seafood. Here is some important background. Canada had originally put on the 100% tax on electric cars to match what the U.S. was doing. According to experts, Canada had largely copied American trade rules toward China. But Trump's increasing use of taxes against everyone, including Canada, created an opening for Canada to work with China instead. Trump's first reaction was supportive. Reuters quoted him on January 16th. It's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that. On January 20th, 2026, the Davos speech happened. 4 days after the China deal, Carney gave a speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. According to CBC News and The World Economic Forum itself, Carney said that the international system based on rules that was set up after World War II is not coming back. His exact words, quoted by many news sources including BBC and Al Jazeera, "Middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu." This line received a standing ovation. Carney did not say Trump's name or mention the United States directly, but the message was clear. According to the New York Times and other news outlets, he warned about coercion by great powers and described a rupture between the U.S. under Trump and its Western allies that would never be repaired. CBC reported that Carney asked middle powers, which are countries like Canada, but also European nations Australia and South Korea, to build strategic autonomy. This means not simply accepting being victimized by American hegemony. The speech was a major event in world politics. On January 21st, 22nd, 2026, Trump responded at Davos. According to Reuters and AP, Trump gave his own speech in Davos the next day. He said, "Canada lives because of the United States." On January 22nd, back in Quebec, Carney responded. According to CBC, Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Also on January 22nd, according to Reuters, BBC, and the New York Times, Trump officially took back Canada's invitation to join his Board of Peace. This is a new group he formed to help solve international conflicts, including the situation in Gaza. Trump wrote in a formal letter, "Please let this letter serve to represent that the Board of Peace is withdrawing its invitation to you regarding Canada's joining." According to Politico and other sources, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick publicly said that Carney's China deal gave a roadmap for changing USMCA during the July 2026 review. On January 24, 2026, the 100% tariff threat came on Saturday morning. Trump posted on Truth Social. According to both Reuters and AP, who directly quoted his posts, if Governor Carney thinks he is going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. If Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. Notice the language, Governor Carney. According to many reports, Trump had previously used governor to make fun of former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Trump had repeatedly suggested that Canada should become the 51st U.S. state. This is the first time he has used that title for Carney. Trump continued, China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. And then the last thing the world needs is to have China take over Canada. It's not going to happen or even come close to happening. Canada responded quickly. According to AP Dominic LeBlanc, Canada's minister responsible for U.S. trade posted on social media, there is no pursuit of a free trade deal with China. What was achieved was resolution on several important tariff issues. It is worth noting what Reuters pointed out. Trump has made many tariff threats since becoming president again. In several cases, he has stopped them or changed his mind during talks. Just this week, according to The Guardian, AP, and CNN, Trump backed away from his threat to put taxes on Denmark and 7 other European countries over Greenland. This happened after NATO's leader Mark Rutte promised more security cooperation in the Arctic. But this threat feels different because it is not about getting a better deal. It is about loyalty. Now here is what is really happening below the surface. Here are the facts we know. Trump first supported Carney's China deal. 8 days later, after a speech that got praise from around the world and challenged American power, Trump threatened economic war. This is my explanation of what is happening. When you connect Trump's words, Governor Carney threats about Canada being a drop-off port claims that China will eat Canada alive with the timing right after Davos. You see that this is not mainly about trade rules. This is about power and making someone feel small. Trump's way of dealing with other countries, which he has shown repeatedly since 2017, is based on deals and personal relationships. According to experts from several research groups, Trump sees friendships between countries not as shared goals, but as protection deals. We protect you, so you owe us obedience. Carney's Davos speech broke that view in the most public way possible. He got a standing ovation from world leaders for basically saying that smaller countries need to protect themselves from the United States, not depend on it. That is not just a disagreement about policy. That is defiance. Here is where it gets more complicated. According to experts, the Trump government has been looking for ways to renegotiate USMCA since before taking office. Canada's China deal just gave them an excuse. The actual trade numbers matter here. According to Reuters, if Trump puts a 100% tax on Canadian goods, it would greatly increase U.S. duties on its northern neighbor, adding pressure to Canadian industrial sectors, such as metal manufacturing, autos, and machinery. But here's the thing. It would also hurt American businesses badly. 60% of U.S. oil imports come from Canada. The car industry is deeply connected across the border. Car parts cross the U.S.-Canada border many times while a car is being made. According to the Economic Policy Institute, sudden trade disruption would immediately hurt American factories, energy users, and construction businesses. Based on Trump's past behavior, the 100% tariff threat is almost certainly a bargaining position, not a final decision. Trump has repeatedly made extreme threats against Mexico, European countries, and Canada itself in the fall of 2025, and then backed down during talks. But the threat itself causes harm. According to business economists and analysts, not knowing what will happen to USMCA is already making companies think twice about investing in North America. The threat of a 100% tax makes it impossible to plan for the long term. There is a deeper question that experts are starting to ask. What if Carney's Davos speech represents not just Canadian thinking, but a growing agreement among America's allies? According to the New York Times and many European news outlets, Carney's middle powers idea strongly connected with European leaders. They are also dealing with Trump's unpredictable approach to NATO, trade, and climate policy. If America's closest friends start building different systems, trading more with each other, working together to respond to U.S. pressure, and using dollars less, that would fundamentally change how the world works. Trump's threat to Canada might not be mainly about trade taxes, it might be about sending a message to everyone else. Stand against us, and this is what happens. That is my guess. But here is what is not a guess. The United States is now threatening economic war against its closest friend, biggest trading partner, and fellow NATO member. That sentence would have been impossible to imagine 5 years ago. So why should you care about a tax threat and a speech in Switzerland? Because this affects your daily life in ways that are not immediately obvious. First, prices. If Trump follows through, even partly on this threat, according to economic analysis, Americans will pay more for gasoline, electricity, lumber, aluminum, steel, and cars. Canada supplies the raw materials and parts for a huge part of American manufacturing. Taxes on imports do not punish foreign countries. They are charges paid by American importers and passed on to shoppers. Second, stability. According to business groups, the U.S.-Canada trade relationship has been one of the most stable and predictable parts of the North American economy for decades. That predictability lets businesses plan, invest, and hire. Take that away and investment stops. According to analysis from economists published just yesterday, companies are already putting their plans to expand in North America on hold because they do not know what the rules will be 6 months from now. Third, and this is bigger, friendships between countries. The United States built its power after World War II, not just on military strength, but on being seen as a reliable partner. According to foreign policy experts, that reliability is what made the dollar the main currency used around the world, what made NATO work, and what gave America influence, even in places where it had no soldiers. When the U.S. threatens its most loyal friend over a speech calling for cooperation among smaller nations, that reliability disappears. This is already happening. According to BBC reporting on Carney's China visit, other countries are watching and learning. If Canada, which has tried very hard to work with U.S. concerns, which shares air defense with the U.S., which fought alongside the U.S. in Afghanistan, can be threatened with economic destruction for making a trade deal and giving a speech. What does that tell everyone else? It tells them that loyalty does not matter. Only obedience does. And countries do not accept obedience for long. They find other options. So what happens next? Based on what has happened before and how the situation is set up, here are the possible outcomes. The first possibility is that Trump backs down, at least partly. This is actually the most common result when Trump makes extreme threats. According to news reports, just this past week, Trump backed away from tariff threats against European countries after talks with NATO's leader. The pattern goes like this: extreme threat, private talks, face-saving deal, claim of victory. We might see something similar here, maybe a 10 to 25% tax on certain areas instead of the full 100%. Canada would probably show it is willing to talk about supply chain security concerns when renegotiating USMCA. Trump would declare victory. The crisis would pass. The second possibility is limited taxes with a long standoff. Trump puts taxes on certain Canadian products, maybe cars, maybe steel and aluminum, while leaving energy alone. This causes pain for both sides, but not total disaster. The July 2026 USMCA review becomes a high-stakes showdown. This is where China becomes the main issue. Does USMCA get rewritten to include strict rules against doing business with China? Canada would have to choose, accept tighter limits on China relations or risk USMCA falling apart. The third possibility is USMCA falls apart. This is the worst case that business groups and economists warn about. If talks at the July review fail, any of the three countries can start leaving the agreement. Without USMCA, U.S.-Canada trade would go back to basic world trade rules, meaning much higher baseline taxes. According to economic studies, USMCA falling apart would cause economic slowdowns in all three countries. It is not clear if Trump would actually go this far, but his own statements calling USMCA irrelevant suggest it is possible. The fourth possibility is that a group of countries forms. This is what keeps Washington strategists worried at night, according to foreign policy reports. What if Carney's middle powers idea actually takes hold? Canada gets closer economic ties with Europe, Japan, Australia, and South Korea. These countries build different trade and payment systems that use the dollar less. They work together to respond to U.S. pressure. Slowly, over years, the U.S. finds itself more alone while its former friends form a loose group. This does not happen quickly, but Carney's Davos speech and Trump's reaction might be remembered as the moment it started. Based on what has happened before, the first or second possibility seems most likely in the short term. Trump uses threats as bargaining tools, but the pattern of behavior, threatening friends, demanding loyalty over shared interests, making international relationships purely about deals, pushes more countries toward the fourth possibility over time. It is not clear if Trump understands this pattern or if he cares. Let us bring this back to where we started. On January 24, 2026, the President of the United States threatened 100% taxes on America's closest friend, biggest trading partner, and fellow NATO member. The immediate reason was a trade deal with China. The deeper reason was a speech saying that smaller nations need to protect themselves from pressure by great powers. What we are watching is not just a fight about trade. According to the evidence from Reuters, AP, and confirmed by many other sources, this is a clash between two very different ideas about how the world should work. Trump's idea shown through his actions and statements, American dominance kept in place through economic and military power.